Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausan Pereira. Developmental assistance can play a major role in transforming Afghanistan, official sources said on Thursday, rejecting US President Donald Trump's jibe at Prime Minister Narendra Modi over funding of a library in the war-ravaged country. Trump took a jibe at Prime Minister Modi for funding a library in Afghanistan, saying it is of no use in the war-torn country, as he criticized India and others for not doing enough for the nation's security. In his first cabinet meeting in the new year on Wednesday, Trump asked India, Russia and Pakistan, as well as other neighboring countries, to take responsibility for Afghanistan's security as he defended his push for the US to invest less overseas. India may be building small libraries as part of the Community Development Initiative, but most of its investments in Afghanistan were on mega infrastructure projects, including the 218-kilometer road from Zaranj to Dilaram, the Salma Dam and the new Afghan Parliament building. India has also been supplying military equipment to Afghanistan besides providing training to hundreds of Afghan security personnel. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze India's role in Afghanistan. Joining me on the program today are Amar, former ambassador to Afghanistan, Major General Ashwani Kumar Siwach, defense expert, Akhilesh Suman, editor, Foreign Affairs, Rajya Sabha Television, and Sreeram Chaulia, Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Ambassador Sinha, I'd like to start the program with you. Over the years, India has played a very vital and a very important role in Afghanistan. Tell us about the role that India has played in Afghanistan.
Well, our role really has been in nation building and reconstruction of Afghanistan, because I have seen the comments of President Trump. There are two aspects. Then one, of course, is the battle on the ground. But the other is Afghanistan is a living country and it needs to reconstruct while it fights a battle. And that is where I think even President Trump only 6 months ago has recognized India's role, that it's a key role, and we continue to play that. And the library, incidentally, is just I think it's a matter of speaking, but the fact is that in the education sector, India has played, I think, absolutely critical role in rebuilding Afghanistan. And
it's as important as a military role, isn't it? I mean, nation building always comes first.
Yes, absolutely. Ultimately, what are they there for? You see, you have to see that US came there post 9/11 with a specific purpose, and that purpose was to hunt for Osama bin Laden. He was found in Pakistan while they continued their battle in Afghanistan, and that is why we are seeing that on the military front they haven't had success. But on the socio-economic development front, I think every report, including the US analysis, actually points to the tremendous strides Afghanistan has taken in terms of democracy, development, infrastructure, education, women's rights and education. So I don't think we should, personally I feel there was a confusion, and I think he mistook the parliament for the library, because I know that Prime Minister Modi knows his talking points very well, and he would not talk about a library.
All right. I want to take the point that the ambassador has made forward, General. Like the ambassador pointed out as well, India's efforts in Afghanistan have been praised widely across quarters. So why should we change anything really, especially when everything seems to be working on the ground for us?
Frank, no doubt about it. As far as India is concerned, India is, one can say, a largest regional donor of $3 billion has been invested in Afghanistan. We are the one which have heavily involved ourselves in reconstruction of Afghanistan and capacity building. As you are aware that parliament was made by us, Salman Dam was made by us, number of hospitals, schools, all these have been constructed by India. And at the same time, the goodwill which we have earned in Afghanistan is tremendous. This is another asset which is there. As far as India is concerned, India has done considerably well. What is suiting us is this, that we have taken a goodwill of that. We do not want to get involved ourselves in militarily, because it is not in our interest. Because today, as far as Afghanistan is concerned, Americans are 14,000 and 8,000 is the NATO troops. Now, in case that Donald Trump is thinking of coming out and it want to reduce its troop by 7,000, and finally will like to come, and he wants that key countries like India, Pakistan and Russia also get involved. As far as India is concerned, I don't think we should have our troops going there in Afghanistan.
Right.
It doesn't suit us.
All right.
But at the same time, we have to be very alert and alive. The dynamics in Afghanistan are fast changing, and the players are changing very fast. The Taliban is now becoming very bold. Taliban and American talks have already taken place in 16 December in Dubai, and Taliban is not agreeing to have a direct talks with Afghanistan.
All right.
And neither.
We'll get into that aspect probably a little later on in the program as to what India's role should be going forward. But before that, let me bring in the professor into the picture. Sreeram Chaulia, what was the rationale behind President Trump's latest jibe, do you think? The ambassador said probably some kind of a confusion really on the part of the president, but what really is going on there?
Well, Frank, I think I see kind of an internal tussle between different sections of the American body politic here. Trump represents the most populist and isolationist wing in it, and he is looking for ways to justify, to transfer the burden, as he thinks, off the US shoulders and onto others in the region. And that's why he's basically saying, we've been taking too much of this and load, and now it's your turn and you should rise up and contribute more. On the other hand, if you see, and I think and there is a bit of a naivety involved, because he's saying Pakistan should also be sending troops there. I mean, that obviously negates the fact that Pakistan has already been militarily involved and is the spoiler there. So nonetheless, even when it comes to civilian assistance, the US, Trump calculation is that we have spent 900 billion there, and we got nothing out of it for 17 years. And, it's time to pack up and, and leave it on to the local players to sort it out. It's not my mess. That's how Trump wants to get rid of this whole monkey off its back, as he sees it.
Then why did they get into it in the first place?
So, well, he would blame previous administrations, and he, as a politician, for him, it's very simple. He's saying essentially, but on the other hand, you see, even with the American spending, they have lost 2,500 soldiers nearly in the last 17 years. They are war weary, and Trump is channeling that kind of sentiment in the American public. But within the US administration, look at the State Department and the career bureaucrats and the Defense Department, the Pentagon, most of them are against this kind of hasty, withdrawal.
Right.
And you see Alice Wells, a Deputy Assistant Secretary General, Secretary of State, made a comment only a few months ago praising India and saying that India is a responsible donor and aid giver in Afghanistan.
Absolutely,
saying that we want to triangular cooperation with India to rebuild Afghanistan. So there is a section which is more, I would say, a saner wing within the American state, which wants to continue the policy of the past. But on the other hand, there is a growing restlessness, and Trump represents that anger and restlessness, saying, nothing has worked in the past. I don't want to spend more blood and treasure on the same old thing and move on.
All right. This issue of, the domestic issue really, as far as the United States is concerned, I want to get into that as well. I'll come to you, Ambassador, to talk about that and a word on that. But before that, let me go across to Akhilesh Suman. Akhilesh Suman, India's stand as far as Afghanistan is very clear, isn't it? I mean, right from the beginning, India has maintained that no boots on the ground, and we've been, very sure about that.
Yeah, you're right, Frank. Actually, just now, Randeep Surjewala has tweeted, and he has told that Mr. Trump has no right to mock Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So you can understand the type of consensus in India across party lines that yes, India has a particular role, and US had been insisting to take a military role. Not today, it has been just after 9/11. I remember Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, and there was a pressure from America that you should also join. But there was an all-party consultation at that point of time, and India decided not to send its troops. So I think that the same policy is continuing. And India had never been responsible for what has happened in Afghanistan. It was US responsibility, and US was fighting a war of hegemony with the USSR, and that Afghanistan was ravaged. So India has decided one role, that yes, we have to empower people, we have to skill their people, so that if Afghanistan comes into normal state, they would have enough capacity to run the country. And I think that India is going on the same line, Frank.
All right. Ambassador, as far as the domestic issues, really, as far as Trump is facing at the moment, do you believe that that has any bearing on what President Trump has said?
I don't think so. we know that right from his campaign, he is committed to withdrawal from Afghanistan. That is, of course, one aspect of it. But this talk about India, Pakistan and Russia sort of continuing the fight, I don't agree really, because ultimately, look at it, there's a contradiction. Americans themselves are negotiating with Taliban for a peace, some sort of settlement in Afghanistan. So India, of course, as part of the SAARC countries and as a neighborhood, we would not want a perpetual fight going on in Afghanistan. We would want actually peace and reconciliation. So we need to really talk about that. As far as the decision on his withdrawal, of course, he is the supreme commander and he can take a call. But look at it this way, that if Americans want to leave, what is stopping them from leaving? They can pack and go tomorrow. Ultimately, they are negotiating terms of engagement or disengagement, so to say. And I think that they should also be talking to the Afghan government on the terms on which they would leave. Because we don't want some sort of a... Taliban cannot be treated as a government in exile which just is para-dropped into Kabul, and that won't be accepted by the region, and I don't think it will be accepted by the Afghan people, you see.
Yeah, the situation in Afghanistan is extremely fragile at the moment, General. The ambassador brought up the issue of Taliban. You too brought it up in your opening comments. How do we, kind of balance out things really in Afghanistan?
See, Frank, what is happening is that number of players are playing a game in Afghanistan. Now, as far as America is concerned, they have opened a direct front with the Taliban. Now, Jalme Khalilzad, who is an envoy of America for peace process, has already had a direct talk with Taliban in Dubai. And the two issues which were coming there, that, where their consensus have not reached, where America is trying to push Taliban to have direct talk with Afghanistan. And when the negotiations are going on, that is the time when the peace should prevail. The ceasefire should be there. The Taliban has not agreed on to that so far. So therefore, as far as America is concerned, they have opened direct front with Taliban, trying to put pressure that they should directly speak to now the Afghan government. So far, it has not happened. Let the other players which are there, now the player like Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran and some Central Asian states, they have also directly opened their front with Taliban. Now imagine what has happened is that Russia has done a peace conference very recently there, where the Taliban has also party to it. We as Indians also have gone, but at an unofficial level. Now Iran has a direct talks with Taliban. Pakistan involvement in Afghanistan is full. You know it. They are not the part of the solution. They are part of the problem. They are the one which are now aiding, assisting the terrorist Taliban as well as Haqqani group and creating a problem in Taliban. The reason why Taliban is today in the mess, the Pakistan has to share the responsibility. Pakistan is a part of the problem. Now what has happened is, due to this problem, Pakistan is putting tremendous pressure that there should be no role of India as far as a new Afghanistan is concerned. And that is where is the challenge as far as India is concerned. We have invested heavily there. We have invested heavily on Charbar. We have bypassed Pakistan and directly going to Afghanistan through the Charbar corridor and going to Central Asian state. If we do not find ourselves as a relevant player in time to come, that will be a loss to us diplomatically. Right. So we have to be alert, alive and ensure that whatever is the change dynamics into this region, we should remain relevant.
All right, we should remain relevant. That having been said, Professor, President Trump has also said that Pakistan should play a bigger role. You mentioned it yourself in your opening remark as well. Now, what role do we really see Pakistan playing in Afghanistan rather than just destabilizing Afghanistan even further?
Well, it needs to be restrained. That has always been our position. And the US has to some extent applied pressure by withdrawing military aid as a condition for restraining its nefarious activities in Afghanistan. But nonetheless, I think end of the day they are looking to have permanent influence there via the Taliban. So they want a power sharing accord which will give them primacy. And that's where I think the rest of the region has to come together and pull them back. And Trump's pressure on Pakistan has frankly not restrained them much, in the sense, if you look at the Haqqani network's activities and if you look at the escalation by the Taliban and the Quetta Shura, from where the Taliban is headquartered inside Pakistan. There has been no reduction in their activities since the military aid has been reduced by the US and cut. So what we are seeing is, I think the Chinese have to come in, because the Chinese have a huge stake in Pakistan, and only they can restrain them to some extent from carrying on with the same old game. Now, I must also mention with the aid, it's wrong on Trump's part to claim that, we are not doing enough. Not only, we have sacrificed a lot for Afghanistan, and that has to be put on the table. When somebody says Zalmay Khalilzad is going to finally brief us, but until now they have left us out of the loop, well, that's not fair, because you see, we are principal stakeholders there, and it is not just a geopolitical influence game that we are playing. Far more important is, for us, our national security is at risk. If there is a jihadist upheaval there, and if there is increased instability in that region, in the country, we are going to be hurt. So I think we are working for stability, nation building, as Ambassador was saying, but also we have sacrificed our lives as well. Many of our, we have lost diplomat, we have lost a military attaché, we have lost many engineers, workers. While these infrastructure projects were being built, we have been subject to, severe physical safety risks. And yet we have persisted without using military means. So I think it shows, and I think, as I said, the part of the US administration that recognizes this still believes that, we must cooperate with the United States, with China, as well as other regional players, to try and transform the field as its state. If the current scenario persists, where the Pakistanis will try to extract their pound of flesh by blackmail tactics, using the blackmail that they have of a negative power they have over Afghanistan, that's going to ruin the place and will never lead to any lasting settlement or reduction in the terrorist problem. So I think we must have a regional, I believe RIC, Russia, India, China is one forum, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Even if Trump is disinterested or not having an impact, we must regroup as a region along with Iran and try and restrain the Pakistanis, and that's the only way to go forward.
All right, Akhilesh, Suman, what's India's plan really going forward as far as dealing with the situation in Afghanistan is concerned?
You know that Afghan NSA is here, and he is talking to our NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval. And I think that India is reviewing our overall perspective, what we can do in coming future. But I think one major task before India is to secure our own spaces there. Whatever our people are working there, and whatever new constructions we are going to do, and what I am hearing that we are also going to make a new dam. So our whole perspective will remain the same, but our whole security situation has to be reviewed. And I think that India is making much more focus on this situation, that we have to secure our own establishment that we have made, and also we have to secure our people who are working there.
All right, closing comments now from all my guests, starting first with you, Amar Sinha. Going forward, we've already established that India has done a lot really as far as Afghanistan is concerned. What more needs to be done, do you think, and do we need to concentrate on certain specifics?
First thing, in fact, a lot of numbers are bandied about. They say that 3 billion is the commitment, but let me tell you that India's commitment is fairly open-ended. 3 billion is what has been committed today. But we look at Afghanistan as part of South Asia, and it is driven by the policy that Prime Minister has enunciated, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. So we do want prosperity, stability, etc. For us, it's priority that we support the democracy, the constitution, and the democratically elected government in Afghanistan. We, of course, will continue to aid them according to their priorities in developmental assistance. And even in military, there is considerable military cooperation with Afghanistan, I must say. It's not only that you have to put boots on the ground, but even in equipping and training them is a huge sort of assistance that we are providing. And we have looked at the gaps that NATO had left in Afghan military, and we have stepped in within our abilities. And of course, please remember, this is not a race in terms of who has done more. Ultimately, we are talking about Afghanistan as a country, it's a nation of people.
And that has to be respected.
That has to be respected. And mind you, it has a history which is longer than India and Pakistan. It was founded in exactly 100 years before us. They have a great sense of nationhood, of history. So if Pakistan thinks that they can have a proxy government perpetually in Afghanistan, I think they are wrong. They may have tactical gains for a couple of years. And what if the Taliban becomes nationalist? What will Pakistan do?
All right. But I must ask you this question, since you were posted in Afghanistan as ambassador. There's much talk, much debate about whether India should directly start engaging with the Taliban. Your thoughts on that?
See, the question is that we engage with the entire spectrum of Afghan population. You also have to remember when people question you, well, most of the Taliban is based in Pakistan. Do we have access to them? Well, it's a real logistical problem. And even if we engage with them, what is it that we are going to discuss? We are going to tell them that the only way to power is through democracy, that they should come back, like many other Taliban leaders have come back and rejoin the process. And that will be the message. And I think at every forum we should reiterate this, that Taliban needs to reintegrate in its own society, because ultimately it's damaging, it's killing its own people, it is damaging its own country.
All right. General, militarily, what should India has done a lot, really, as far as training Afghan forces and so on and so forth. What more can be done and what should be done really going forward?
See, Frank, they don't deny fact. As far as India is concerned, we are very clear on that. There are no boots on the ground.
Absolutely.
Other than boots
we are
on
all
the
on
ground,
the same page as far as that is concerned. Yeah.
We must do a lot of training. A lot of training is happening as far as as far as Afghanistan officers are concerned, the men are concerned. Their police force also being trained in India. They are both men and women. They have been trained in IMA, OTA. So therefore, that part is being covered, and we are going to also invest a lot of money in that. What is going to happen is that do everything possible to strengthen the government of the day as far as Afghanistan is concerned. India must play an active role. Because you remember that any disturbance in Afghanistan or any Talibization of Afghanistan, then spilling over to Pakistan occupied Kashmir and then coming to Kashmir is a ground reality, which we must understand that. Now of late, you remember China also is slightly worried, because they have invested heavily on China-Pakistan economic corridor, and which is not too far off from Afghanistan. They also want the peace to prevail. That's why in Wakhan corridor they have made a military base, and that is to the liking of Afghanistan government. So therefore, overall, China also want that, there should be a democratically elected government should come. India also want, other players also want. It is only the Pakistan which is a spoiler, which has to be handled with care. As far as India is concerned, India must go all out to help Afghanistan to settle down, and other than boots on the ground, must give all aid, support and train them, provide them guidance, provide them security, ensure that Afghanistan in future can stand on its own feet.
And what must we do to deal with Pakistan really on the eastern frontier?
As far as Pakistan eastern front is concerned, we are doing everything possible. The point is that deterrence is the key word. We are hitting him hard where it hurts him. And as on today, Pakistan has realized it. See, after all, certain things are visible, certain things are not visible. And whether it is a line of control where our grid is very powerful, that is infiltration gate. We are not letting any infiltration take place. We are very strong as far as the hinterland is concerned. As on today, you will find it in next 2-3 years, you will find that total militancy in Kashmir is going to be reduced.
All right.
So therefore, as far as Pakistan is concerned, the message is very clear. Will hit you where it hurts.
Okay, fine. Professor, how important is it really for the region and for India to have a stable Afghanistan, and what does it mean really?
Oh, it's everything, because it's at the heart of Asia. There is actually a formal process called Heart of Asia, and Afghanistan is there. And the stability of South Asia and Central Asia is interlinked by Afghanistan. And the vision of President Ghani as well as many other Afghan leaders has been that Afghanistan should be a corridor through which trade and commerce and legitimate movement of people should happen, linking these two sub-regions of Asia. So that is the ultimate dream. But I must say on one point, see, a larger issue about Indian aid is not only Afghanistan. I want to highlight for our viewers, our developmental assistance model is relatively small compared to Chinese aid or to American aid. Those are the two big, or the Europeans or the Japanese. Those are the big players generally. But when you look at the per unit efficiency of our aid, the kind of impact that we generate, it's far higher. And that is the real point. It's not a 3 billion versus 900 billion of the United States. That's not the comparison. How many lives have we touched? And that was our point when we rebutted the US accusations. That how many lives have we touched, and how are we transforming people in terms of welfare and their daily needs? Because it's not just about the war, it's also about governance. And the US has spent so much on governance reform there. And the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan reconstruction has often come with critical analysis faulting its own government, the US government, saying that, most of these are boondoggles and you're wasting resources. We are not wasting resources. Every library we built, or every, educational institution we set up there, every hospital, every agricultural institute, every small, development, quick impact projects that we do, all of these are in many ways appreciated by Afghan people. If you take a public opinion poll, 900 billion, the giver of 900 billion would rate very low in average Afghans' minds. They are conflicted about, because they also have US forces there and they're seen as occupation by many people. On the other hand, India is doing its bit, quieter, lower profile, but at the same time high impact. So I think that is the ultimate test of what we are doing, and we should keep doing that. And of course, also look at contingency plans, because if the Taliban keep running over more and more and take over most of the state controlled territories, then we will need to come up with contingency plans as well. We cannot simply sit back and say that we will just do development. So as Ambassador was saying, we are doing development, military training, and possibly a third regional plan for managing the spillover of this escalating war also has to be factored in.
All right. Akhilesh, Suman, closing comments from you on the best way forward.
That we have always told that, we want Afghan-led, Afghan-owned solution of Afghanistan. So I think India is assessing the situation, and how I was talking to the foreign ministry official, they are telling that we have to wait and see that how US withdrawal takes place, and accordingly we will decide. But major thing that Ashraf Ghani and India has to decide what amount of cooperation from Taliban they want. Because in the last meeting when Ashraf Ghani was here in Delhi, he was a bit lenient and he was trying to involve Taliban some way or other. And then in the meeting, non-official delegates were sent from here in that meeting. And I think India is trying to see that how Afghanistan want to see, and how Afghanistan realizes that how we have to go through it. And we have to believe on Afghanistan.
All right. On that note, then, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's it on this edition of The Big Picture. See you again next time.